I'm joined now by United States Senator J.D. Vance. Good morning, J.D. Vance. Welcome back.
Thank you. How are you?
I'm great. I want to get to East Palestine in just a minute. East Palestine. East Palestine. I'm from Ohio. I get it right. But I want to ask you first because you're a veteran of Silicon Valley and Yale Law School. And they both have two stories. The first story is Stanford Law School and the meltdown there. Now, you're an elite law school graduate, as am I. What did you make of what happened at Stanford Law School?
Well, I think it just shows how far these places have fallen. I mean, you have a federal judge. You have, frankly, a guy that a lot of these kids would probably like to work for in the future, and yet the political environment of the school is so bad that they hysterically attack the guy. And then, of course, the backup from the administration. I've been pretty disappointed in the administration of Yale Law School for, I think, giving too much credit to some of these woke protesters. And look, this is not what Americans want out of their elite law schools. They want these people to be trained to be good lawyers, to respect the Constitution. And if they're not doing that, what's their purpose?
Now, I think Stanford is reeling badly, and I believe that federal judges are going to look askance at their law review editors who want to get a federal clerkship. I think there's a lot of downside going here. But the key question for me, Stanford and Yale, your alma mater, and Stanford are private law school. My alma mater, University of Michigan, and Berkeley are public law schools. Berkeley and Michigan have vast DEI bureaucracies. Do you think it's per se unconstitutional to have a Department of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion? It is by definition race-based.
Yeah, that's exactly right, Hugh. I really do think this stuff is per se unconstitutional. You really, all the DEI stuff, I mean, is explicitly, as you said, based in racial tests. They're constantly looking at the people of color, or the color of people's skins, and drawing inferences from it, making decisions based on that skin color. That's not what we're supposed to do in this country, and rightfully so. I think these vast bureaucracies are a problem. And I would say, yeah, Yale and Stanford are private universities, Hugh, but they get a lot of federal money, and that suggests some things can change.
Okay, well, now I want to move on to the second Silicon Valley issue, which is going to come back to East Palestine in just a moment. Silicon Valley Bank collapsed. First of all, were you a depositor there when it collapsed?
I was not personally a depositor, but certainly businesses that I had interest in were.
Okay, so you might have a conflict. I'm not sure. I just call that to attention. How do you have a conflict when we talk about SVB? I won't bring you into it if you do.
Yeah, Hugh, first of all, I think I do have a conflict, but my view from this from the very beginning is that the Feds should not have bailed out SVB, even though it was maybe in my personal interest for them to do so. I don't think that you can have a government basically declare by fiat that every uninsured depositor of a given bank is all of a sudden insured. And if you think about what Janet Yellen has said since then, she's basically saying we're going to draw a line. On one side of the line, there's no such thing as an uninsured depositor. On the other side, there is. But we're not going to tell you where that line is.
Exactly.
Where does that leave all of the community banks? It leaves them very much in the lurch. And these guys, I think, are rightfully terrified.
This is the worst position to be, where the government reserves the right to pick a winner, but doesn't tell you by which rules they will pick a winner. And I view the SVB thing as being the elites protecting the elites. And I go back to Peggy Noonan's 2016, The Rise of the Unprotected. And you were a voice of that. I think the rest of America looks at the billionaires who were bailed out and the high-tech companies that were bailed out. Smart ones got out, like Peter Thiel. But Roku had almost $500 million on deposit in that bank. Why are we saving Roku from the inability to have a chief financial officer who's awake?
It's a good question, Hugh, and I don't know the answer. I think the answer is, unfortunately, because these guys were very politically connected. And what happened is they made an argument, of course, that the bank was systemically important to the financial system. I don't buy that argument, but even if you think we were about to have a bank run, there was a way to provide liquidity to the financial system to prevent a contagion-like effect run on the banks without bailing out the uninsured depositors of SVB. And that to me is really the tell here, that this was about politics and not about finance and not about saving the banking system.
Oh, I think it was about elites taking care of elites. Progressive elites taking care of progressive elites. Because Joe Biden said on Friday not doing it. On Sunday, he, Yellen, and Jerome Powell bailed them out. And they bailed out all their tech bros in the Silicon Valley. And it's elites protecting elites. I'm just sick to death of it, JD. And I think the country is. Do you sense that?
Oh, the country has been sick of it for 15 years. And these guys are going to be dealing with pitchforks if they don't get their act together. Of course, if you go back to the 2008 bank bailout, A lot of people are still very frustrated by that. And to see effectively the same rules in play where if you have politically connected friends, you get the bailout, and if you don't have those politically connected friends, you don't. I think it frustrates a lot of people, certainly frustrates me. And looking forward, Hugh, we have a very big problem on our hands. What is the rule in this country when it comes to uninsured deposits?
Yes.
What does the banking system do from our small regional banks all the way to J.P. Morgan? The Fed, the FDIC, and the Treasury have thrown this entire question into a lack of clarity and uncertainty. So what do we do here? That's a really important policy question, because if we don't answer it the right way, Hugh, the community bank will not exist in this country. If you know that SVB gets a bailout, but your local community bank doesn't, how does that bank possibly survive and compete in the marketplace?
You know, Senator, I have told people, if I'm a small banker right now, I try and find out who Roku Lobbyist is, who SVB's connections are. I try and hire the people that somehow got to the Democrats, because it took a supermajority FDIC, supermajority of the Fed, plus Joe Biden telling Janet Yellen to do it. So you've got to have left-wing lobbyists. That's the rule of law, is that you've got to be connected. And boy, it's disgusting. That takes us to East Palestine. And by the way, for the benefit of Media Matters, when JD said they're going to have a pitchfork moment, he's not calling for violence. I just have to say that, because you know that Media Matters for America will have a headline later, JD, saying that you called for violence today on the Hugh Hewitt show. It's just sort of...
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, B follows A. Let's go to East Palestine. We have regulatory failure in the Valley. High tech gets bailed out. We have enormous regulatory failure 40 miles south of my hometown down the Route 11 from Warren in East Palestine, and nothing has happened. It's really remarkable to me. What do you make of this? You write about it in FoxNews.com, but it's just astonishing.
Look, I think there's a lack of earnestness and urgency from the Biden administration. I hate to say it, Hugh, but I think that they recognize the people of East Palestine probably went 75% for the Republicans in 2022. They don't see them as their voters, and so they're not willing to play ball. I think that there's this idea that if, you're rural and conservative, you maybe don't get the same credit or don't get the same interest from the federal government. But look, people are still suffering in East Palestine. And I don't know if you saw our hearing yesterday at the Commerce Committee, but we heard from a very compelling mother, Misty Allison, talking about the effect that this has had physically, emotionally, psychologically on her young kids. I was really touched by it, and I hope that it gives some urgency to the folks across the aisle on the Commerce Committee on down, because we've got to do something for the people of East Palestine. And unfortunately, a lot of them still feel like their government's leaving them behind.
And something would begin with Joe Biden going. Do you remember when Bush got hammered for not going to Katrina?
Yeah.
And Joe Biden's indifference, it's gobsmacking. But I think you're right. That border between Pennsylvania and Ohio is Trump country. So pound sand and go home. If this had happened in a swing state like Michigan or Wisconsin, Biden would have been there the next day. It's Ohio. They've given up on Ohio. And Sherrod Brown, have you talked to him about bringing his chops to bear? Because Sherrod Brown can't get anyone there but Pete Buttigieg.
Yeah, so Sherrod and I actually have, he has signed on to a bill that we're doing on railway safety. And I think, to his credit, he has paid attention to this issue when a lot of Democratic politicians have ignored it. So, look, we're going to have to do something better on railway safety. We're pushing that pretty aggressively. We're also going to have to deal with the long-term consequences for East Palestine, because if you think about what do you do if you're a small business in East Palestine right now, right? Your revenues have fallen through the ground by 90%. If you're a farmer in East Palestine, nobody wants to buy your livestock. We're dealing with not just a health problem, but an economic catastrophe through no fault of their own. They didn't ask for a train to crash in their backyard and release a bunch of toxic chemicals. So we're going to be dealing with this problem for a long time, and I hope the president actually shows some urgency on this issue. He said a couple of nice things. He hasn't visited. He hasn't forced his administration to do the things that it needs to do, and that is a huge failure of moral leadership from the president of the United States.
Last question, JD. My wife asked me last night, is your brother going to leave Warren because of this? I said, no, Warren is upstream from East Palestine. The water's going to run down. The groundwater's going to, if it moves at all, it's going to move down towards the Ohio River, not up towards Lake Erie. And so I don't worry about people to the north of East Palestine. But man, they're screwed. Do you think the country understands how badly screwed the city is, the township?
I don't, Hugh. I think that people are starting to understand it after yesterday's testimony. and certainly some of my colleagues, even some Democrats like Peter Welch from Vermont, I think really understands, based on the testimony, what happened to the people of East Palestine. So I think it's starting to break through, but the economic devastation of this community is tough to overstate. And, the local mayor there, he's a really good guy, and he's trying to rebuild his community, but he's doing it in an environment where half the people want to leave. The tax base has fallen through. They can't even get the cleanup finished in East Palestine, in part because of the lack of urgency from the Biden administration. How do you rebuild when you don't have the cleanup completed? And then, of course, you've got to deal with everything that comes after. It really is a tough situation. But they've got a senator who's never going to forget about him. We're going to do everything we can to help him.
Billions for Silicon Valley, not a penny for East Palestine. That's to me the takeaway. JD, am I wrong? Last word to you.
No, you're not wrong. And of course, I doubt the the East Palestine local community bank is going to be getting a bailout from the Biden administration if they suffer some problems. Look, this is unfortunately the way things work in our country right now. If you're well connected, you can get a bailout from the federal government. If you're not, you're left in the lurch. It's one of the reasons why I wanted to serve in Washington, to hopefully change this. And if we don't change it, Hugh, we're going to have a massive problem in this country where people lose trust in every institution, in corporations like Norfolk Southern, the Biden administration, the EPA. We just got to do a better job. And unfortunately, we're not doing it.
Have you endorsed anyone yet, J.D. Vance, for president on the Republican side?
Yeah, I endorsed Trump, Hugh, and frankly, I maybe prematurely did it on your show, and then a Wall Street Journal op-ed came out the next day.
Okay. Well, sorry you stepped on. I thought that was the case, but then I knew there was some to and froing. So, did you go with Trump to East Palestine when he went there?
Yeah, I did. I've been there a few times, but I did go with the president when he did.
I appreciate your going. I appreciate your coming on. Thank you, Senator Vance. Keep coming back. I appreciate the time this morning.
Thanks, Hugh. Take care.